Good evening. My name is Jason Wallace. I'm the pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church here in the Salt Lake Valley, and we welcome you to another installment of the Ancient Paths. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to take the opportunity to invite you to worship with us. We meet Sunday mornings at 11 a.m., Sunday evenings at 5:30 p.m. at 8630 West, 2700 South. That's Main Street, Magna. We also have a sister congregation in Ogden, Berean Presbyterian. They meet at 3350 Harrison Boulevard in Ogden. They meet at 9 a.m. And we also have a Bible study going in Utah County, and a couple of ones that are just getting organized in Park City, and also looking to get one started in Heber as well. Some folks up there are hoping to get one going soon. If you'd like more information on these things, you can go to our website at www.christpres.net, or the site for the show, www.ancientpaths.tv. You can also give us a call at 801-969-7948. Well, we are privileged this evening to have with us Mark Howsam. Dr. Howsam is a lecturer in philosophy at Utah Valley University. He is also a ruling elder in our congregation. It's been some time since we've had him on. We had him on at the same time that we had the president of the Atheists of Utah on some time back. If you'd like to access some of those old shows, you can go to ancientpaths.tv, and those shows are available there. Well, Dr. Howsam, it's very good to have you with us.
Thank you.
The reason I ask you here this evening is that for the longest kind of time I've been wanting to ask you about the New Atheist. They have appeared in print and the news and all kinds of other media for the past several years. Who are the New Atheists?
Well, they're basically a group of atheists who have become activists for atheism. They're trying to promote, not just articulate atheism, but promote it in the broader culture, and say that we need to get rid of the irrationality of religion. We need to replace it with a culture that's rational and therefore atheistic. And so I think the primary new thing about the New Atheists is their desire to use a phrase from another context, come out of the closet, eradicate the opposition of religion, and really dominate the culture with their own ways of thinking about things.
I've got a couple of quotes here from a couple of the prominent New Atheists, and I'd like to show these to you and the audience. The first one is by Christopher Hitchens. He says, "Organized religion is violent, irrational, intolerant, allied to racism, tribalism, and bigotry, invested in ignorance and hostile to free inquiry, contemptuous of women and coercive toward children." And then we have another sweet assessment by Richard Dawkins. He says, "The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully." Now, historically it seems that there was agnosticism, where people basically were trying to carve out some kind of intellectually respectable position to say, well, I am not convinced. I'm skeptical that there is a God. Mm-hmm. You did have some atheists like Robert Ingersoll and others, but atheism per se seemed to be relegated to people sitting back and grumbling and gloating that they thought they were smarter than everyone else. But these guys almost sound like a caricature of fundamentalist Christians. The caricature that's often put forward in terms of just the harshest, most overbearing hyperbole, the greatest demonization of anyone who disagrees with them. Am I off base?
Well, I think a lot of people have that impression of them, and they do come across that way. I think I think, as you said, atheism has often been it's seen itself as a minority position that wants to say everybody's being irrational and we've got rationality worked out here, and we're we're ahead of the culture and all of these things. You just combine that with an activist attitude, especially the New Atheists really began to do their work, their new kind of work after September 11th, and one of their major theses is that religion is immoral. It is damaging to morality. It is damaging to civilization. So basically, what you've got is a group of people who think of themselves as very intellectually superior in a lot of ways, who feel their position is the position of reason, everybody else is being unreasonable. You combine that with an activism that's grounded in this strong moralistic sense that we've got to wipe out the opposition before it wipes out civilization. I think that explains a lot of what we see in them.
Would it be fair to say that for a lot of them, the original sin in society is actually religion?
Yeah, in the broad sense of irrationality is how they think of it. Religion is the ultimate symptom, in their view, of complete irrationality, of believing things for no good reason, of not demanding evidence for one's thinking. And they think, and rightly so, they see irrationality as tied to immorality and problems in society, and therefore they see religion as one of the biggest hindrances of furthering the moral goals of society.
So, traditionally there's been at least some acceptance by a lot of atheists that religion has served as a check on at least some forms of immorality, but these guys have taken it to the extreme that religion is the fundamental problem of humanity.
Yeah, I think that is a somewhat new element in the new atheism. I mean, it's not unheard of. Bertrand Russell said similar things. He mentioned Robert Ingersoll in the 19th century, but there is much more. There's more moralism. I would say the new atheists are very moralistic. They have a strong sense that they are not only have reason on their side, but that they have morality on their side. They have ethics on their side, and so their view of religion is that it is this great moral impediment that they have to attack and destroy.
One of the curious things to me is that they are so moralistic, but I don't see how they have a basis for their morality. I mean, in Darwinism, there is no right and wrong, is there? There's just what is.
Yeah, that's one of the fundamental paradoxes, I think, of the atheist movement in general, and new atheists in particular. I think you're absolutely right about that. There's no basis for objective morality. I mean, in the atheistic universe, in the naturalistic universe, if the matter and energy universe that we live in is all that there is, then we are accidental byproducts of a series of events over time that had no purpose in mind. We're here by accident. We have no purpose for our existence. When we die as individuals, we're going to disappear into non-existence. The whole species is going to go out into non-existence when our sun goes supernova in the future, or until we blow ourselves up or whatever. And there really is no cosmic objective significance to anything that we do. And so, in fact, one interesting thing you see is that the atheists will sometimes try to have their cake and eat it too. When they're talking about religion, they think religion emphasizes humans too much. It's too man-centered. So they say, Earth is just a pale blue dot in a gigantic universe. We're really not all that significant. But then when they turn around and talk about morality, they completely ignore all of that, and they remove the cosmic perspective, and they say, no, this is absolutely important. This morality is very crucial. But if they were more consistent, they'd say, well, if Earth's really just a pale blue dot in a meaningless cosmos, then who really cares, how we live ultimately?
It seems like there's a fundamental irrationality. One of the expressions of this in popular culture was the movie Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams is portraying this high school teacher that he tells the young men in his class, "We and all we do are nothing more than food for the worms. Therefore, carpe diem, seize the day."
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't really make sense, does it?
Well, I mean, there's a sense in which you could say, well, if there's no morality, there's no cosmic significance, then I might as well just do whatever I want. If seize the day implies I should just go off and live, and eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, then I think there is that is in a sense a logical conclusion of it, but as I think as you point out that what the seize the day concept really is getting at is this moralistic concept. Let's go out and do something important in the world, and that I don't think makes any sense. I think the naturalistic, the atheistic worldview is very has kind of a tunnel vision in terms of its evaluations of human motivation. I think a lot of the new atheists think that if you simply just have human desires and the facts of the natural world, that somehow this automatically leads to trying to promote human rights, trying to treat people in an appropriate kind of way, removing genocide from the world, things like that. When in reality, human motivation, human psychology is so diverse and complex that it really leads to nothing. I think of naturalistic ethics in a sense as, in terms of motivation, as being like walking into a rotunda where you have doors leading to all kinds of different directions depending on what your motivations are. But that's not something that the atheist, secular, humanist community really wants to acknowledge. They have a certain morality they want to arrive at, and they're determined to get there whether it's ultimately rational or not.
I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but there's actually division within the atheist community over this issue, isn't there?
Yeah, in terms of objective morality, certainly the mainstream atheist point of view has a strong moralistic bent, as I've said, a strong emphasis on, there's really things we ought to do, things we ought to be working for. There's certainly there's a smaller group that's kind of in the minority that acknowledges there's really no such thing as objective morality, but it's not a popular point of view. I know people who are on both sides of the issue.
Now, you've actually done debates up at the University of Utah, other settings, with prominent atheists. We actually co-sponsored a debate with the Humanists of Utah. We've also, you were invited to participate in a sort of a short debate or discussion with Austin Dacey when he was in town. I'm not a philosopher, but it seems as if many of the arguments that the atheists are making for their morality are, of course we have morality, because we say we have morality.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get a lot of assertions like that. In fact, I think a lot of atheist argumentation amounts to how loudly can I assert something, and that's certainly true here as well. I think what you get is kind of this jump. They start out saying, well, look, there's human motivations, there's certain things that humans like, certain things that they don't like. We like to eat. We generally don't like to bang our heads on steel walls. So there is kind of a science of morality in a sense there that you could develop. Even if naturalism is true, you aren't going to do certain things because you just don't want to do them. So they start out with this very obvious observation, but then they make an irrational leap from there to, therefore, our fundamental concept of Western morality is valid and true, and we should support the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and things like that. It just doesn't follow from the premise, and if you try to attack that, then you get the loud assertions.
One of the audience at one of these debates, I'll never forget, there was a brochure in the back where it says, we welcome our heretics, we don't burn them at the stake, or something like this. And I brought up what the Soviet Union and Communist China and others have done in the name of atheism to their heretics on a far greater scale than anyone in the name of any religion has ever done that I can think of. Yeah. And she got indignant, and during the question and answer, she came up to the microphone and she said, I'm offended. This guy in the back told me I was wrong, and it's wrong to tell people they're wrong. And that made perfect sense to her, that it's wrong to tell people they're wrong.
Yeah.
And she's completely unreflective of the fact she's saying other people are wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, there just seems to be this total disconnect for a lot of at least the popular proponents, that they say, I'm prejudiced against anyone who's prejudiced, or I'm absolutely sure there are no absolutes, and it's
Yeah, although I think we should make a distinction, because the really radical new atheists are certainly not afraid of saying that people are wrong. There's some division in that camp too. And one of the divisions that occurs in the atheist community is between confrontationalists and accommodationists. Basically, are we going to go out there and yell at people and tell them they're wrong at every possible opportunity, or are we going to try to make friends with people who agree with us on certain causes and not alienate maybe moderate religious people, as they put it? And so you do get some different, a little bit of a different take on things.
Honestly, sometimes when I listen to Dawkins or to Hitchens, or especially Sam Harris, who seems to be the least tactful of them all, I mean, it's stiff competition there, yeah. But to me, it reminds me of Fred Phelps of the Westboro Baptist,
right,
that goes and screams at people at funerals and things like this. I mean, it seems to be that same kind of...
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. I mean, Fred Phelps thinks that homosexuality is wrong, and of course, he's right. We agree with him on that. But then he thinks that therefore the appropriate thing to do is to go and yell at people and don't explain yourself clearly. And I think you do see a similar kind of feeling here. And again, I think it comes from an extreme moralism. It's this sense of, these guys are wrong, they're dangerous, so the way to deal with them is not to talk to them, explain it in intelligent dialogue, but to yell and scream about it. Sam Harris has a concept called conversational intolerance. And now I think that there's two ways that can be taken. In one sense, I think it's actually a useful idea. It means when someone is saying something irrational or immoral, don't let it pass. Try to deal with it, because we want to root these kinds of things out and make the conversation substantial. And I think that's good. But unfortunately, it often gets taken to the kind of extreme you're talking about, where you just, every time someone says something, you have to just jump on it and attack it with this extreme emotional response that really doesn't listen or deal rationally with the issues.
Yeah, there really is an attempt on their part in this argumentation to try to drive all religion from the public sphere isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if religion is as evil and dangerous as they think it is, then of course they want to drive it out of the public. They like to drive it out of the world, but at least drive it out of the public square, make a secular society.
Sam Harris said, "If I could wave a magic wand and get rid of either rape or religion, I would not hesitate to get rid of religion."
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, from a Darwinian standpoint, rape is natural.
Yeah, although that's not what Sam Harris, of course, is saying there. But, I mean, he wouldn't approve of rape. But obviously he's making a strong point that religion is far worse than rape.
There is... The National Academy of Sciences has actually entertained, from some of these people, the proposal that in order to be allowed into higher degree programs, you have to affirm a belief in Darwinian evolution.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's not only a proposal. I mean, it's not a formal enacted policy, but it happens, of course, all the time in various disciplines. And I mean, Richard Dawkins just wrote an article a letter to Rick Perry, in the Republican, candidate, and basically said, you cannot be an educated citizen of the world today unless you accept evolution. He said a lot harsher than that, but I mean, there is this feeling like if you don't accept evolution, you shouldn't be allowed to teach, you shouldn't be allowed to be involved in any kind of higher office. I mean, that's absolutely a feeling that's in that community, and that's because they see evolution as kind of a linchpin argument of rationalism. It's kind of the opposite of evolution, of religion. Religion is the paradigm idea of irrationality. Evolution is the paradigm idea of rationality, and they use these as kind of linchpins for how to think about the whole thing.
And yet they get very upset whenever you start questioning the presuppositions of either atheism or Darwinism.
Yeah, I mean, they don't think of it as having presuppositions. It's just the obvious result of looking at the facts in an intelligent manner.
One of the questions I ask of one of the gentlemen you were debating a few years back, he was trying to make the argument that ethics are very, very straightforward, very obvious, that what we should seek is the greatest good for the community. And so I raised the question, in pre-war Germany, under the Nazis, but prior to World War II, the society decided that there were a whole host of what they termed useless eaters that were burdens to society.
And it wasn't only in Nazi Germany either, even in the United States.
Well, I'm getting there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they killed tens of thousands of people and were cheered on by the New York Times and by a whole host of people in this country. And basically, eugenics was just as strong here, or at least nearly as strong in the United States. We have the infamous case of Carrie Buck, where Oliver Wendell Holmes stated, what was it, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. Yeah. They were forcibly sterilizing tens of thousands of people in this country.
And Oliver Wendell Holmes was a very prominent advocate of Darwinism and Darwinism's applicability to law in that period.
Well, I asked this gentleman, on what basis can you tell someone that a child born with, say, cerebral palsy, say, a child that is not mentally impaired, but physically impaired. This child is never going to be productive in their view of society. On what basis can you tell them that it's morally wrong to kill that child? And he just avoided the issue entirely.
And I'm trying to remember the conversation, but you were talking about a born child at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's part of what I was talking about earlier. You have, there are some common sense observations about what kind of society it makes sense to have. I mean, there can be some rational arguments about saying, just even from a naturalistic point of view, granting that there can be a universe without God in general, but from a naturalistic point of view, you want to, it makes sense, it could make sense to create a society in which there's a degree of fairness and respect for all people, because then you're going to be treated fairly and respectfully. I mean, that's a plausible argument to make, but it's still a bit of a tunnel vision, because there are other kinds of societies people can desire. And what they do is they make a leap. They make a plausible kind of argument. Well, wouldn't you want to be treated fairly? So wouldn't you want a society where people are treated fairly? And then they jump from that to, well, that's the only possible kind of society anybody could desire. And therefore, to have that society, you have to do all these things, whatever they want to pack into that as they see as good, which basically is just taken from conventional morality. So they make a leap from some very, very humble observations. I don't mean they make them humbly, but the observations are humble. And then they leap to basically whatever conclusion they want to get to.
Part of the whole narrative that they try to create is that religion has led to wars and murders and all kinds of nasty things, and it lies at the root of almost all human evil. The things that they typically specify are the Crusades or Salem witch trials, which to me is bizarre, because in the case of the Crusades, you have the Muslim armies conquer the Near East in the name of Allah.
When they were Christian before.
Right, it was a Christian area before. They're seeking power, and they're doing it, and as Muslims, they're claiming Allah is leading them into battle, and they're praying to Allah. They're using the symbol of the crescent moon. A lot of people don't realize that they swept across northern Africa, invade Spain. They'd already taken over the Persian Empire. They invade France. It's when Charles Martel turns them back that the croissant was created as a celebration. It's a symbol of the crescent moon. The little what would you call it? Not pastry, but basically the little bread.
Yeah, right.
The crescent-shaped bread. It's a celebration. Every time you eat a croissant, you're celebrating the victory over the invading
I didn't realize that.
Muslim armies. After Charles Martel wins that battle, Christian Europe begins trying to fight back and to drive them out of France and then out of Spain. They get a call in the 11th century from the Byzantine emperor, please come help us, because most of the Byzantine empire had been overrun by the Muslims. And so when they go and they fight, they're fighting under the sign of the cross. But the picture that's often presented is that, here were these peaceful people just living in harmony with everyone around them, and then here were these mean Christians who came. How Christian that war was is a subject for another time, but there were thousands of people that were killed. And religion was part of the argument of what was taking place.
Well, there you go. You see, religion is bad.
But in contrast, you've got the Soviet Empire, which is explicitly atheistic. And in contrast to their thousands, they kill tens of millions. You've got China, you've got the killing fields of Cambodia, you've got Idi Amin killing off about 300,000 Ugandans. I mean, the list goes on and on of atheistic governments, explicitly atheistic, not simply trying to drag their religion along with them, but in the name of atheism, they're slaughtering 100 million people.
Yeah,
and that's in one century.
Granted, they had more advanced technology, but
I mean, yeah. Basically, this whole narrative of the evil Christians, they're to a great extent having to go back to 1,000 years, nearly to basically 1,000 years to the Crusades, or they're having to deal with a tiny handful of people who are killed in Salem, Massachusetts, by a court that is clearly ignoring the Bible.
And the other Puritans themselves corrected and put a stop to.
Yeah.
They didn't need to wait for the atheists to come along and do it.
Yeah, there was no need for the atheists to come riding in on their white horses to correct them all. But atheism as a moral system, as a state sponsored system, is not something we have to speculate about, is it? I mean, it's been tried numerous times.
The response of the new atheist to that kind of an observation is, well, they'll say, well, the communist countries, sure, they were atheistic, but they were being irrational. They were behaving more like religious people because they were embracing this unscientific ideology, and so they weren't really consistent, secular rationalists. They were acting more like cultish, sort of people. But I mean, and atheism doesn't have to lead to something like that. I mean, you could imagine. I mean, if you got a different personality involved, it might lead to something different. That's kind of the thing. It doesn't lead anywhere. It leads to wherever the people in charge want it to lead. But it doesn't put any kind of barrier to that kind of thing. Whether communism is a rational ideology or not, the fact that people could get away with promoting it the way they did, I mean, I think really was helped along by the fact that they were atheistic, because they didn't have the moral barriers to stop people from doing that. John Locke, back in the 1600s, when he was arguing for toleration, when he was arguing that, well, we shouldn't persecute people, we should tolerate different groups in our society, back in England in the 1600s, he made an exception for atheists. He said we shouldn't tolerate atheists because atheism has no basis of morality, and so they don't have any reason to keep oaths and vows and to keep the laws, and so they're dangerous to society. Now, I'm not arguing that we should approach things in that way, but I think there's some truth there, and we tend to think, oh, he's just being mean, but there's some truth there because there is no foundation for morality, and so humans are humans, and they'll do bad things wherever they are and whatever group they're in. but they sure are. They can do it more easily if we remove theoretical barriers, to keep people in behaving morally.
I want to continue this, but first I want to open up the phone lines. If you'd like to join in the conversation, we're talking about the new atheist. The phone number here is 801-973-TV20. That's 801-973-8820. We invite you to call in and join with us. To me, one of the ironies is that for so many years, atheists called for toleration. Can't we all just get along? Just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean I shouldn't be allowed to teach and this and that and the other. But now that there's power behind them, now we have people who are arguing for complete intolerance on the, towards anything else. I mean, it seems so many times you have people that they say, we need to tolerate each other. We need to be, we need to just get along and live and let live and all this. But people seek power and domination.
And people seek to conform society to their views of what it should be, and that implies problems for dissenters. I mean, there are plenty of people in the atheist community, even among people who like the new atheists, who are still who do call for tolerance, and they do believe in those values. But you do see, I think we're just beginning to see more and more of the intolerant attitude. Hardly anybody in the atheist community is saying let's legally put people in jail for being Christians and so on. But they're saying, well, a creationist shouldn't be allowed to have a teaching position or things like that. That's happening more and more. They don't see it as persecution. Or to take another example, the proposed ban on circumcision in San Francisco not too long ago. There was a proposed ban some people tried to make this into law, that circumcision would be banned and there would be no religious exemptions. And I actually had a number of conversations with some atheists who were complete supporters of that idea. And I said, do you realize that what you're actually advocating is banning Judaism? I mean, you're banning Judaism if you ban circumcision. I could not get them to acknowledge it. They said, well, this is not persecution. We're just trying to protect infants from being mutilated against their will. And they simply refuse to see it, the implications for Jews, and really face up to that. And I think we're seeing more of that.
In fact, some are taking it to the point that they need to protect children from their parents. I mean, some have gone so far as to say that religious instruction of children should be considered child abuse.
Yeah, I mean, a number of people have said that in the atheist community. I mean, to be fair, you have to distinguish between, something being an immoral practice, but not necessarily something that should be illegal. I would say the majority of people in atheist communities would not advocate making child abuse or making, teaching Christianity to children illegal. They would just try to persuade against it. But there are some who would go so far as to try to make it illegal. And certainly, as soon as you start even using terminology like child abuse, you're getting dangerously close to that.
Richard Dawkins said, faith can be very, very dangerous, and deliberately to implant it in the vulnerable mind of an innocent child is a grievous wrong.
Yep.
Now, one of the things I'm curious, when I observe sort of your popular atheist, the kind that you see in high school and college, it seems that
a lot different than the older kind.
A lot of young men basically embrace atheism because essentially it frees them from any moral restraint. Anything they want to do is now fine because there's no one to tell them it's wrong. And it seems to be greatly liberating. But if you really think that through, if we are nothing more than this Darwinian complicated sludge, if we have no future, no past, no present, if we are just basically no more importance than a worm, then what good is there either? I mean, it seems to be a lot of fun that you can go sleep with your girlfriend and you can lie to your boss and you can rob your neighbor and say, I don't have to feel guilty because I'm smarter than everyone.
Yeah.
But why bother getting out of bed? Why bother doing anything? I mean, I asked an atheist at Salt Lake Community College, I said, why are you studying? So I can get a job. Why? And I kept pressing, and basically he said, it makes me feel good. I said, heroin's a whole lot quicker. It's a whole lot quicker route to that. I mean, if it's just about your feelings, drugs can do a wonderful job.
Yeah. I think. I mean, there could be a temptation there if you're a very morally concerned person. It can be. You can think, well, if there's no cosmic significance, sure, there's no evil and there's no good, but that means I can do whatever I want. So I mean, that there certainly is a temptation, I think, that can come out of that. I mean, I would.
I mean, logically, from a Darwinian standpoint, there's absolutely nothing better or worse about me helping a little lady across the street or pushing her in front of a bus.
Not in an objective sense. I mean, you can distinguish between the sorts of motivations that are going to make people happy or unhappy. There are certain things that if I was an atheist, I wouldn't want to do because nobody wants to do them. But there's nothing objectively wrong with any of these things.
All they can really assert is that society at large should make rules, and they just ignore when society at large does horrific, terrible things.
Right. I think that's that tunnel vision again. They ignore. I just read an article by an atheist arguing that this cooperative society where we all help each other and share and things like that is going to make us all overall more happier. And my atheist friend who sent this to me, I responded back to him and said, I mean, sure, that you might want to create a society like that, but what about a society like ancient Sparta or something that it's based on antagonism and competition? I mean, look at our enjoyment of sports as a culture. I mean, who's going to say you go to a football stadium and say, wouldn't you all like this game better if you just kind of shared the ball and all cooperated? No, of course you wouldn't. It's the competition and the antagonism that's the essence of it. So it's not really that much of a stretch of the imagination to design a society that's based on those kinds of values. If human desires, and broadly speaking, is your only basis, it's just not going to lead you to a lot of specific conclusions. It's going to allow a lot of room for variety.
But they cover up their lack of logic with sound and fury.
Yeah, I think that's right.
We're going to go ahead and take our first call. We have with us Mike from West Valley. Mike, good to have you with us.
Hi, how's it going tonight?
Doing well, thanks. Go ahead.
I was just watching the show, and you guys were talking about atheism, and I don't understand how our the powers that be allow it to be taught from kindergarten on, and I think it is a religion. They're obviously teaching something that's a religion, and it's completely opposite the creationism, and you guys said too when you mentioned that creationism, you believe in that. People look at you funny. They don't think that. They believe that Darwin is the way to go, and I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Hey, appreciate the call, Mike. Why is it that atheism is taught in public schools?
Why is it that atheism is taught in public schools?
Yeah.
You mean, well, I mean, it's not taught explicitly, is it? I mean,
Well, is it taught?
Well, I think, yeah, it's taught implicitly because if you there's no neutrality. If you teach, if you have an educational curriculum that tells you about the natural world, it teaches physics and biology and mathematics and things like that, but it doesn't bother to mention God or anything like that. I mean, that's communicating something. It's saying that the natural world's all there really is. That's all that's important. So I think it does implicitly communicate a naturalistic worldview. Sure, and that's why evolution is taught as well. Evolution is the creation story of naturalism. It's the creation story of the atheist worldview. So you're not allowed to bring in religion in the classroom. You have to look at everything from a naturalistic perspective, and evolution is it.
It's been argued that not only do they have their creation myth, they have their priesthood, which are professors.
The scientific
the high
community.
priest, the high priests are in the university system. The lower priests are in the public school system. They have their martyrs. They make up stories like the whole Scopes trial. Where the Scopes trial is hardly anything like Inherit the Wind. What is it? Summer of the Gods, I think, is the history that actually shows. It's a publicity stunt. But at any rate, we're going to go to Frank, our next caller. Frank from Salt Lake City. Good to have you with us.
Hi, guys. Just wanted to ask Mark, how do the atheists justify having any morality without God?
Well, I mean, the typical way of doing that is to say, as I was talking about earlier, you have subjectively there are motivations that human beings have, that we like to do some things, we don't like to do other things, and basically what they do is they try to use that as a framework to build an idea of what sort of lifestyle and what sort of society would make us and human beings in general happy, and they start off with these sorts of very basic observations, and then I think they leap to a conclusion that basically what they think of as a democratic society that honors modern secularist values is the only kind of society that really can make people happy, and so a way of living that makes people happy. So they say, therefore, this is the only rational way to live. Therefore, we should do it. So it's a morality based on human desires. Basically, they think of morality as an instruction manual for how to be happy, and they think that the secular humanist ethical system is basically how you can be happy. I think they leap from that to the assumption that and they don't often make clear, which is that this has any kind of cosmic importance, is objectively important. Of course, there's no basis for that in naturalism, and if you press it, they don't really know how to deal with that. They either just keep asserting it, or they admit, yeah, okay, it's subjective, but it's still really important because it makes us happy. But that's kind of how it's built up frequently.
And historically, in order to make people happy, they have to kill a whole bunch of them, lock up anyone who's religious in an insane asylum, and control every facet of people's lives.
Well, I mean, to be fair, of course, there's a lot of people who wouldn't advocate all of those sorts of things, but some people would.
But this isn't just something that was done off in a corner. I mean, this is the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And numerous
American atheists don't like those examples. They try to avoid them. They value the concept of freedom. They're very American in the way they think about it, at least in America, and but they don't. But that's just because they're here, and these are the values that they want to honor, not because they can scientifically derive them from a psychological study of human desires or something like that. That's what they'd like to claim, but they just don't have the basis for it.
We're going to go to Leilani in Ogden. Leilani, good to have you with us.
Okay, thank you.
You're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Okay, so this is Leilani, and first thing I want to say is hello, Pastor. This is Leilani from the Berean Presbyterian Church, and hello, Mark, as well, brothers.
Hello.
The only comment that I wanted to say is something that Paul Washer had taught me, and it's, there really is no such thing as atheists, because whether it's drugs, alcohol, even something as simple as snowboarding, everybody worships something. But not wanting to worship Christ or God, it's really just because they don't want any accountability for their actions, or, just anybody. They want to be shut off from the world, almost. They just want to do their own thing, and they don't understand that every knee will bow and every lip will profess, Jesus Christ is Lord. It's really just boils down to not wanting any accountability and wanting to have their own life, using, every breath that God has given them for their own, selfish endeavors.
Thank you. So, what's your view? Are there technically atheists in the world?
As far as why are people, what are they really after? Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't worship something. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, if you have to have some ultimate goal in your life, right? I mean, you can't. They don't have God, but they've got something else that functions in the same way. I think everybody does. In atheism, it's got to be the only thing that's there available is basically their own desires.
I think a great example is Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek. You know, here's a guy who explicitly rejects traditional religion, but the religious aspects of his thinking show up over and over, don't they?
Yeah, so you're talking about, I mean, there's an internal contradiction in atheist ways of thinking. Yeah, I mean, well, the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans says that the knowledge of God is available to all humans. I mean, it's available through the things that are made so that men are without excuse. So ultimately, in that sense, no one can be an atheist. Everybody knows that God exists. Everybody responds to that. Everybody lives in a world that only makes sense in light of the existence of God. And so in that sense, you know, nobody is really an atheist. And it does come through. I mean, I think you said the moralistic attitudes of the new atheist. Yeah, I think Star Trek's a good example of that. It doesn't make sense in their worldview, but they know that it doesn't make sense to think of human beings as being equivalent to rocks in terms of value. They know that's not true. They can't justify it, but they're still living in the real universe.
For anyone who ever had a doubt that you and I were both geeks, I'm about to dispel any doubts. To me, one of the fascinating things for Roddenberry is that you know, Captain Kirk, my favorite captain, you know, yours is Picard, but
yeah,
you know,
like
they
that.
have this prime directive where there's sort of this atheistic moralism that, you know, we're not going to interfere with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But he can't live that way.
Yeah.
I mean, he plays it, you know, he's able to play it up better on some of the later iterations of Star Trek. But in the original series, you see that this is not a tenable position.
Right.
That they're actually, you know, he has to take a stand. That there is some standard of right and wrong, and he's constantly trying to figure out some way to impose this system on others.
Yeah, I think that's right. You probably don't want to get too deeply into the details of Star Trek, but I think there is that tension there. Yes.
We try to bring some
It's
cultural
tempting,
relevance. We're going to go to Roland in Provo. Roland, good to have you with us this evening. Roland?
Jason, the viewer is always at a disadvantage. We're not prepared for this academic presentation. But I want to say this. I think there's a lot of atheists among Christians, and there's a lot of Christianity in atheists. It all depends on how we act upon it in this life. I was thinking particular as we act as Christian nation, for instance, and I brought this up last time when we talked about Vietnam, our action in Vietnam. The man who knew and wrote the book about Vietnam, the McNamara, The Lessons of Vietnam from Robert McNamara. You can read this book, and he said at the end of his 11 points why it was a mistake. He said this: we misjudged then as we sinned the geopolitical intentions of our adversaries, and we exaggerated the dangers to the United States of their actions. That was the explanation. That meant it killed 58,000 Americans. It killed 2.6 million Vietnamese. It destroyed their forests with poison gas, with poison things. That was an act of Christianity in a total misunderstanding or evaluation of the process. These were the good Christians, right?
No.
They're so right. So that wasn't. Doesn't that get you finally? What are we doing with that Christianity? I mentioned the other day to you when we on the same thing. We said, I think the Christian nations are failing Christ because they have replaced Christianity with national interest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roland. Roland, I sympathize to some extent that many things are done in the name of Christianity that have absolutely nothing to do with Christianity. Sometimes we try to take an American patriotism and baptize it to where we're essentially wrapping the flag and the cross all up together and blurring the distinctions. That's ungodly. I think that you're right that there is a lot of atheism in what calls itself Christian, because we don't behave as if there is a God that is going to judge us, and to whom, who has made us and given us everything, who has given us a good way and warned us against rebellion. At the same time, those who try to lump the Vietnam War in as some kind of Christian thing, I think that it's misguided, because we didn't get into Vietnam. I mean, it's a complicated issue, especially with 5 minutes left in the show, but I don't think Lyndon Johnson was exactly a strong advocate of anything Christian. Essentially, I mean, we didn't even fight it as a war. I mean, basically, he's trying to export the Great Society, and he thinks that by bringing economic development and jobs programs and all these things, that somehow or another this is going to happen. At the same time, there are some real issues of us not being involved there, because there were many killed as part of our participation, but many, many more were killed by what we were supposedly trying to stop. I mean, the killing fields in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge killed roughly a third of the whole country of Cambodia, just killed them all in the name of atheism. So I don't see it as a condemnation of Christianity at all, but definitely one of the atheistic Khmer Rouge.
I think I'd like to add too, Roland. I think you raise a very important point, though, that I think is. I'm glad you bring it up, because I think it's very worth addressing, and that is that Christians don't always act the way we should, and it's easy to have a conversation and say, "Oh, look at what these atheists are doing," and all that, and kind of feel superior about it. And I think we have to avoid that attitude. Christians, I mean, we're Christians because we believe we're saved by grace, and that we are sinners who are rescued by the grace of God and justified and sanctified through Christ, and so we have nothing to boast of at all, and we need to acknowledge that, and that we're not Christians because we're superior in any way. In talking about atheism too, although atheism is ultimately wickedness. It's suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. It is enmity against God. It has no rational or moral basis. It destroys the basis of morality and so on. But we should also acknowledge that atheists still are made in the image of God. They bear the image of God. They can be very nice, friendly people. I have a lot of contacts with the atheist community and many friends in that community, and I like them very much. And there are all kinds of different people in that community, like there are in any place else. And we need to, while we stand very firm in responding against the dangers of atheism, we also need to recognize the humanity of the people that we're talking to and talking about, and try to communicate and dialogue with them and interact with them on a level that's not quarrelsome or mean-spirited or anything like that, but that really does try to take their humanity seriously. So I really appreciate your comment on that.
To me, one of the ironies is that in their ranting and raving and demonization, to some extent, they are like the Fred Phelps of the atheistic community, and this has actually caused many atheists to be much more open to a respectful, reasonable dialogue with you.
Yes, I think that's right, and there are a lot of different kinds of people in the atheist community. When I interact with people, I have people who insult me, who attack me, and call me names, and do everything they can possibly do to me. But I also have people who defend me in the same community. So, and who are very good friends and honest people on a human level, and that both sides of that need to be acknowledged.
We have a caller we're not going to be able to get to until after the show. If Ross will hold on, we'll try to get to you as soon as we can. But I want to take this opportunity to thank Mark for being here. He is a lecturer at Utah Valley University. He has participated in several debates with prominent local atheists. We actually co-sponsored, our congregation, one of these debates with the Humanist of Utah. He has been invited by the Humanist of Utah and others to appear at some of their various functions and also to participate in some of their discussion groups. So I think this is a good thing. I think that sometimes we fear that we can't engage people, that we have to be fearful. But, you know, Paul says in Romans that they're suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. We don't have anything to fear from the truth. We can engage and we can speak the truth in love. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Mark for being here. He is a ruling elder in our congregation. We serve together, and we invite you to worship with us. This show is sponsored by Christ Presbyterian Church, a congregation of the Orthodox Presbyterian denomination. We meet Sunday mornings at 11 a.m., Sunday evenings at 5:30 p.m. at 8630 West, 2700 South. That's Main Street, Magna. We have a sister congregation. Someone called in a few moments ago from Berean Presbyterian in Ogden. They meet at 3350 Harrison Boulevard at 9 a.m. And we also are trying to establish Bible studies in churches in Utah County and up in the Park City and Heber areas. So if you'd like more information, you can give us a call at 801-969-7948 or go to our website, www.christpres.net. If you want to, you can also go and drop us a line. We receive email from those, and you can also see past episodes at ancientpaths.tv. Until next time, we wish you the Lord's greatest blessings. Good night.